Back. This is Family Time 164. We're talking about civic engagement. This ties in very closely with service that we talked about last week. And last week we were kind of focusing on our smaller, our micro environments, those people who are closest to us, our friends, our family, our community. Now I want you to think in terms of larger scale. How can we give back to our larger communities, whether it's school or our community, the town we live in, or the world as a whole, which it can be daunting to think that large. And it's probably most important to the saying says, think globally, act locally. What can we control in our own little corner of the universe? But the importance of civic engagement cannot be underestimated. There are so many things in the world, in our immediate communities and larger communities, that can be addressed if we're willing to commit ourselves to them. And I kind of have one big question, which I took from this professional fighter named Justin Wren. Some of you maybe heard me talk about him in class before. We'll talk a little bit about him this week. But Justin Wren, very interesting story. He was a guy who was bullied growing up, really had to deal with some pretty terrible bullying and struggled with depression, was suicidal, got addicted to some other substances, but he found an outlet in first wrestling, became a champion wrestler, and then wanted to be a mixed martial artist, wanted to fight in the UFC. So he does at a fairly young age. He's on the Ultimate Fighter television show. He gets an Ultimate Fighter contract. He's headlining events at the Hard Rock, and he's creating a name for himself in the fight world. However, unbeknownst to a lot of outside people, he's still struggling with depression, still dealing with substance abuse issues, and he's really not happy. So he decides to leave all that behind, went to Africa, partnered with an organization called Water For, eventually starts his own charity called Fight for the Forgotten, and they work to dig wells for people in different African nations so they have clean water. Specifically, they work with the Ubuntu Pygmy people in the Congo and work to empower them through food, water, and land initiatives, getting them their own land, helping them with farming practices, and of course, clean water, and getting them out of modern day slavery, which is a real thing that still exists. And he found through this a sense of purpose. The way that he describes it is he was fighting against people when really should have been fighting for people. I think that's a powerful idea, that so often we maybe think we're fighting against these other things in our lives, these obstacles. And sometimes maybe we think we're fighting for ourselves, and those are all fine things. But when we fight for someone else, fight for something that we care about that's bigger than ourselves, that becomes really powerful. And a big question that I've heard him ask is, if you could do one thing to change the world, one thing to improve the world, and you knew it wouldn't fail, you knew it would work, what would you do? That's a pretty big question. And is it practical for us to say, this is the one thing in the world that I would change, and expect it to change? Maybe not like that, maybe not with the flip of a switch, but we have to believe that we can make those changes and we can contribute to change. And Justin Wren has since gone back and forth between Africa and the United States. He's continued to fight through Bellator, different fight organization to raise money and awareness for the Pygmy people and for the foundations they're supporting. And he's also had to sacrifice a lot of himself. He's had different illnesses and things that he's contracted while being in Africa and living with the Pygmy people. So just a very interesting guy, and a guy who has really shared the message of finding a greater purpose through civic engagement, through service towards others. That's what I want you to think a little bit about. If you could make a change, something to change the world, what would you do? And then you can start to think more locally. How can you be engaged with your school, your community, your extracurricular activities that could in some way contribute to that big change you would like to make? Until next time, much love.